Hello and welcome to my video about Paulo Coelho. Panther. Panther's currently cruising around the desk, so we'll see if he joins us again for a few of the other comments. Earlier on my channel, I've done a review of The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I'll leave a link up above to that. I went through and talked about the various special features in my copy, including a map of the journey that Santiago takes. There's questions if you're doing a book club. I've enjoyed this story because if you've seen my Life with Books Part 1 that I just recently uploaded, fables were a big thing for me, not just because it had animals, but because they were stories with lessons at the end of them. As an adult, I've enjoyed parables. Books like The Celestine Prophecy really spoke to me because, again, it's a story with lessons. For me, The Alchemist was very much like that, and I found the same with all of the books that I've read by Paulo. In The Alchemist, we meet Santiago. He takes a journey. For me, the big takeaway was it isn't about the destination, it's about the journey. So sometimes you may feel like you're taking a detour, you may feel like you're stuck, but in reality, when you look at the big picture and all the pieces that go together, during those times and in those locations, you've learned something or met someone or had a conversation that's what you needed to help you continue moving forward. Another book that I read by Paulo is Aleph. These are the only two books that I have purchased by him. The Alchemist came up in an in-person book club that I used to belong to, and it was one of the readings. The irony is, it's the only book that I kept from the months that I was involved in that group because most of the authors really did not speak to me. But this one was definitely a great read. The other Paulo Coelho book that I've read is Aleph. I originally borrowed this from the library and decided that it was a book that I would read again. I have all my little sticky tabs in it. Yes, Noah, you'll be impressed. I only have a couple little crunchies in the spine, but I do have writing throughout it as well. This version was translated from the Portuguese by Margaret Jo Costa. Now, I always wonder with translated versions, and I've mentioned this before, English is not my first language. And I know when I would translate for my grandmother or other family members, you don't do the translation word by word, you condense it to the meaning. So I'm always a little leery of when I read works that have been translated because it depends on the translator and how they chose to do it. I think they're quite accurate to what they're translating, don't get me wrong. I just take them with a pinch of salt, shall we say. So in Aleph, our main character is actually Paulo himself. He is going on a tour throughout Russia, which I'd always known was a huge country, but there are 7 different time zones that they go through. They're on a train going from one end right over to the other side. I believe their final destination is Vladivostok. If I said that right, I'll put the name up here. It was funny when I came across that name in here, it reminded me of an old group that I used to listen to who did a song with that name in it. The premise in this story is that Paulo has, up until now, met several people from his past. This has to do with reincarnation and making amends for the choices you made. His character in this particular version was I don't think he was a priest yet, but he was certainly involved in the burning times Other people know that as the Spanish Inquisition, and I'm sure there are other names for the horrors and atrocities that occurred during that time. So in this case, he was an individual, and it flips from the past to his current situation, brought on by a young woman who comes on the train. She is from his past and one of the people who was taken to her death because he stood by and said and did nothing. So we have that back and forth, making amends, lessons that are learned, and how do you learn to forgive yourself when you've done something so utterly horrific. Like I say, it's an interesting read. We have, of course, this portal where they go to the past and he learns about his role in it, as well as learning about the women who were involved, and it goes from there. Another book that I read by him that I also enjoyed was The Spy. In that book, our character is Mata Hari herself. It's a name that I'd heard but really didn't know much about. For those who may not know who Mata Hari was, she was accused of being a spy and killed in front of a firing squad. The first part of the book goes through the historical and factual information about her. The next part is Mata Hari herself, and I'll put her actual name up here. She's talking about the choices that she made, how she decided to leave her husband and young daughter, ended up in, I believe it's Egypt, where she learned the different dances, and that's what she had become famous for, was her dance routine. She had become wealthy, started moving in many different circles, and unfortunately, that was part of what had gotten her into trouble. When she was accused of being a spy, suddenly all those friends disappeared, and basically she was left on her own, trying to defend herself. And of course, that didn't work out very well. In her letter, she's explaining to her daughter about the choices, and she believed up until the end that she would be released because she knew she was innocent. The final part of the story is told from the perspective of the lawyer who tried to defend her. Unfortunately, because Mata Hari's life was pretty much based on lies and alternate identity, because Mata Hari was not her real name, she'd left behind a daughter, she was moving in various circles, and because of all those lies she had told, although the lawyer knew she was innocent, there was no way to prove it. Her friends had all distanced themselves, not wanting to be involved in whatever else was going on. And so she was killed in front of a firing squad. The takeaway from that story, of course, is how you choose to live your life and who are your real friends. If you're interested in Mata Hari, I definitely suggest checking that book out. Like many of Paulo's other books, it's a fairly short read. The final book that I'll talk about today is The Devil and Miss Prym. Again, it's a nice short story. It's a parable. We meet a young woman in a very tiny village. There's another woman who's watching for someone to arrive. They're noticing shadows around people, and she notices when this individual comes into town. Our young woman, Miss Prym, intentionally sets herself in a place so that she meets this individual and gets to talk to him. And she discovers that he has come with quite a bit of gold. He's going to be burying it out of the village. He takes her with him. She's given a not so much ultimatum, but a choice, because she knows where this gold is, and to have it means she could escape this village, which is what she wanted to do. The main takeaway from The Devil and Miss Prym is watch what you wish for, because you just may get it. We see how the different villagers respond. This woman herself needs to make a choice about whether she just takes the gold and runs, or whether she makes better choices. Again, I found it to be an enjoyable read, but with all of Paulo's books, I'm looking for the message in the story. I enjoy that with some of them there's the historical perspective, so in terms of Aleph, learning about the burning times, with The Spy, learning about Mata Hari. I enjoyed The Alchemist because we have this wonderful map and the message about those little detours and pit stops do have a purpose. It may not feel like it or seem like it at the time, but it does when you look backwards. That's a very brief summary of 4 of Paulo's books. There are others that I will be talking about in a future video. If you want me to go into more detail about Aleph or Mata Hari or The Devil and Miss Prym, please let me know in the comments down below. Also, let me know if you have read any of Paulo's books. Do you have a favorite, one that you would recommend? And until next time, remember, that little side trip isn't a bad thing. Take good care.